So now that we're in this big space, it's a really beautiful space. There's also a big screen, and I can see your faces quite clearly, which is nice.
You need to lower your screen a bit so that your face is centered in the screen. Thank you.
And what about the sound? Is it okay? Can hear okay?
Yeah.
Okay, then turn on your microphones, everybody.
Turn on?
Yes, on.
And now I do.
How do you like my beard?
Oh, very nice, Rod.
Looks very wise.
Yeah, I have a wise beard. I'm Ayatollah.
Yeah.
So I would like to have some feedback because there are many practitioners of integral yoga on the screen right now. And I have labeled this a seminar rather than a workshop because because we're not doing a workshop and we have an opportunity to hear from others who have experience to relate, whose lives have been proceeding under somebody's making a lot of noise.
I'm at the cafe. It's likely that's me. I can mute if that's better.
Everybody.
I wanted to hear everybody.
Oh, you want to hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just invited them to turn on their microphone.
All right. In that case, excuse my interruption. Let's get this out. All right.
Yeah, so many of your lives have been proceeding under. Julie, you need to tilt your screen down a little bit so your head. Okay, great. And your experience is not different from my experience, and your knowledge is not different from my knowledge. And we each have our own ways of embodying that understanding and that gift of knowledge that we have received. Good. Maybe you can you see Charles now? Charles is in the space here, but he just turned on his phone camera. So I'm welcoming some input.
Rod, this is Catherine, and nice to meet you. Just so you know, I'm having a migraine today, so I might come in and out of class or turn my camera off because it's just hard for me to look at the screen. But I was lying down in Shavasana listening to you speak. And what I always find challenging in yoga practice, and you talked about this a bit, is how our left hemisphere, the kind of doing part of our mind and the thinking, always overthinking, it did start to, I could kind of, I was breathing and I could dissipate it by just listening to my breath. And I've had a few experiences in pranayama where I felt a complete stillness, but it's very fleeting. So I don't know how to use, how does one like, I don't know if it's possible, I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but I'm a real beginner. So how does one attain that, hold on to that stillness?
Good question. I mean, excellent question. And it's a challenge that everyone has. And you know, one of the reasons why it's so challenging is our society is so predominantly left brain, linear and active oriented, and means and ends and so on. And we grow up with that, the stimulation of that part of our brain. And so yoga offers us some techniques for transforming our consciousness, which means basically activating the right brain, silencing the practical mind, silencing the rational mind, stilling the vital drives that make us think that we have something important to do and make us feel good that we have done it. This is a vitalistic pattern. And this is what life and reality mean to us because of our conditioning. And yoga is a process of breaking down that conditioning, breaking open the mind to a higher level of ourself. And it's absolutely contrary to the values of our social system. Moreover, these are problems of the human being, not just of our social system, but our evolution is mental and vital. And if we, Sri Aurobindo's teaching is based upon the idea that evolution goes on, and we are not, you know, our current idea of being human is temporary, and there are higher ranges of manifestation that are possible and destined for the human. There is the beyond human. And then there is the beyond human, what he calls the supra-mental species. And he's looking many lifetimes ahead of where we are right now. But he's also looking back 2,000 years and 3,000 years, and I'll just slide a little bit back into the left brain idea of the cosmic hierarchy. Both the Greeks and the Vedic rishis in India had the idea of what the Greeks called procession. The higher consciousness that we are, our higher self descends from the supreme, absolute divine reality in the form of divine radiation, emanation, into the supramental, supermind, divine mind plane of principles, and those principles become embodied in the space-time world of the universe. And so then there's the evolution back towards the source of the principles that are already involved in things. So Sri Aurobindo uses the term involution and evolution, which means exactly the same thing as the Neoplatonics meant by procession. And then the gods in our soul, like for them Eros, are moving us back towards union with the original truth of ourselves. And in the Vedantic system, it's Agni, And Agni is our inner being that is moving us also back towards the full expression of our higher self. And so we're all at this stage of mental evolution. You know, Sri Aurobindo says somewhat tongue in cheek when he's speaking about the mental being, he says, that we are. So this being that we are is the one that he wants us to transform. This is a very large project, a very immense project. And as individuals, we participate as best we can in this project and in this mission, which is called for us integral yoga. But it's there are many traditions with many names, and in fact, it's the human project. But we get delayed and sidetracked in various ways that we must go through. For example, at present, there's this preoccupation in America with democracy, and this has been the preoccupation of human beings for a couple of thousand years. And Sri Aurobindo refers to the daemon, you know, the daemon that oversees the development of this collectivity of human beings on Earth today. This collectivity of human beings on Earth today must learn to live as one, so that the individual and the society have a mutually reinforcing relationship. And this can be understood as an expression of divine love. It can also be understood as an expression of social strife. And in fact, there is a oneness between social strife and divine love. And that is something, you know, that's a principle of evolution that the human being in societies has been living out for centuries. And the seers have known this and have said it generation after generation in many different cultures. So the spiritual knowledge that we have is a knowledge that enables us to understand the difference and the sameness of ideas like love and democracy. And we can understand the difference and sameness of the pranic desire in us and the divine Shakti that can transform this pranic desire in us into an expression of truth force, truth seeing, and selflessness. And to transform the pranic desire or the left brain orientation into an energy of selflessness and an identification with the universal life and mind on earth is a need that we feel because it's something that we lack. And so there's this idea in philosophy of the divine excess, the unlimited truth, love, and beauty, and the lack of those things in the typical mind, life, and body of organisms. And because the organisms have this lack and the divine has this excess, then there is a descent and an ascent that is sometimes known as evolution. It can also be known as procession or transformation. Um, on the whole, it's a way of understanding ourselves. And then we use our will to discipline that left brain and open and allow to encompass that more intuitive right brain. And you know, there's a marvelous book that and teaching that's alive on the internet today by Ian McGilchrist that I recommend that people read. He's written a book called The Master and His Emissary, and he's done a lot of neurological research, and he has come up with innumerable examples of how this holistic right brain and this linear left brain work in relative dissociation in our culture, but they're much more integrated in lower levels of evolution in animal consciousness. And there's this possible reintegration of this peripheral right brain and this linear left brain in human evolution, and those who already embody it are inspired people who are creative, and people who have a spiritual opening to their higher self. So here's a scientist, Ian McGilchrist, talking in terms of science about something which is not scientific, and it's quite brilliant, actually. So you could look up the Ian McGilchrist lectures and online and learn quite a lot from them.
I wrote it down.
Someone else have a comment, input, to substantially uplift us? Julie.
Well, I don't know if I can substantially uplift everyone.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Of course.
well, the question you asked before to give a comment or about the session, and I was thinking of, what is my progress in the yoga? Well, it's really hard to say, but I can say this right now is that, you said these are not new. This is nothing new that I'm hearing, but it's all new every time. It's like, I can't get enough. It's all, so to me, it's just, that seems like progress to me, that it's just coming in fresh ways every time. And, I guess that's what I wanted to say about that. But I also wanted to ask a question, which is hanging. I don't know if I have a fully formed question here, but there was something about, you said also about the silent mind in the beginning, of thought folding in on itself, something like that.
Drawing back
into itself
from thought into the mind itself. And this is the main teaching of Buddhism, This is why people sit in the zendo facing the wall. The pulling back of the thought mind and the sense mind into the self, the Purusha, which is the essence of mind. Mind is the creator of our existence. On that higher level that Sri Aurobindo calls supermind. Supermind, he says, is the same idea that he has, that which he calls supermind, is the idea that the Greeks had, which they called logos. It's the origin of difference and sameness universality, and individuality. This is a mental principle in existence. These are mental principles. Our mind, our individual ego mind, perceives difference and sameness in flowers, in animals, in our own behavior, in species. Our mind is able to perceive difference and sameness, like in all of us here today, because difference and sameness are the essential truths of our existence. And those truths are emanations of the one reality, which is love and power and beauty and bliss, the divine. And when that divine manifests in time and space through Indra, the god of illumined mind, and Vayu, the god of enjoyment and consumption and possession, and the Agni, the god of energy and light and power, this is a kind of separation and division and dispersion of that original oneness and difference into universal powers and forces. And those then become the souls of things that express these essential powers in various limited ways. And so the mind knows these things because these things are the expressions of mind, which is the one supreme reality. But we experience this reality as we experience it, as human beings experience it. It's not the same way that cats and butterflies experience it, but they also experience it. They also have sight. Sight is a universal principle, as I said the other day. And each of the 40 or 50 phyla that exist in life has evolved sight in all different kinds of ways and structures that are not horizontally related. Sight, seeing, the Greeks called edein, to see. And what does one see? Idea, ideas. And what are ideas? Forms, qualities, existences. Not products of thinking, but essences of things. Those are ideas. And so we have little ideas. Those are big ideas. We are able to understand big ideas because we have these little minds that are based upon the same principles. Consciousness is a field of energies, and the human being is a form of consciousness, and so is the butterfly and the monkey. So we all have the same faculties. We perceive existence in our unique ways, and Julie asked a question about mind. a very highly evolved and talented mind that doesn't understand itself as well as it should, maybe, because it's been formed by a society and an educational system which has certain lacks certain things, and has certain excesses in other things. So there we are, you know, we're this evolving human mind, mental being, with a possibility of ascent to our higher self and descent into our lower self. And the teachings of yoga should facilitate the former and should limit the latter in various ways. I think, you know, one of the things I observed yesterday and communicated to Alan was that he could shift a certain phrase that he uses, which is what we're looking for, to what we're allowing to be. The allowing of surrender. You know, we're not looking for something in yoga. Yoga is essentially passive. We need to learn passivity with respect to our desires and impressions and ideas about things, the way things are. In order for that pattern of behavior to become open to receive, to allow an energy of consciousness from our higher self to manifest in us. In order to allow that to manifest in us, we have to surrender and to some extent renounce and reject the behavior patterns that are normal to us. So Sri Aurobindo insists upon passivity, the passivity of the mind. And I can read some original text so that in case you have any doubt about this idea.
Please ask everyone to mute first.
Would everyone please mute their microphone? For the knowledge of the self, it is necessary to have the power of a complete intellectual passivity. The power of dismissing all thought. The power of the mind to think not at all. Which also means the power to stop the tongue from vibrating with sound. Talking, saying, repeating, insisting, instructing, da 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 da. Now let us do this. Now let us do that. To silence the mind means also to silence speech. And then to realize that knowledge is still there. and even more. And action and force are still there. We read this passage yesterday from Savitri, about how in the most inner and silent space, the power that normally we exercise through speech was already there and able to realize everything that it would have tried to realize through speech, just from the self, from consciousness. So he says here, this is a hard saying for the Occidental mind, to which thought is the highest thing, and will be apt to mistake the power of the mind not to think, its complete silence, for the incapacity of thought. But this power of silence is a capacity and not an incapacity, a power and not a weakness. It is a profound and pregnant stillness. Only when the mind is thus entirely still, like clear, motionless, and level water, in a perfect purity and peace of the whole being, samatha, and the soul transcends thought, can the self, which exceeds and originates all activities and becomings, the silence from which all words are born, the absolute of which all relativities are partial reflections. Only then can that self manifest itself in the pure essence of our being. In a complete silence only is the silence heard. In a pure peace only is its being revealed. Therefore, to us, the name of that, Tad Brahman, is the silence and the peace. So moving on a little bit farther from sutra, before we get to tantra and purna yoga, one of the most important, most powerful, and most central principles of yoga is mantra. And all of the great spiritual traditions have and do employ it. It is a speech that emanates from the inner being and resonates in the hearer of the speech and transmits, as Sri Aurobindo says, embodies the soul of things in the mind. This is mantra. It's a form of expression other than the silence, from the silence, that brings the silence. It doesn't stimulate mental activity. It stimulates the opposite of mental activity. It stimulates that higher pranic shakti, because it's a product of that higher pranic shakti. So this word, logos, this creative word of the truth of things, known as mantra, is a tool, an instrument, a gift that Sri Aurobindo in particular was a master of. And so the whole of Savitri is a product of that principle. And that principle is a principle of creation. It is a principle that emanates directly from that higher Satchidananda plane of the self. Therefore, what it reproduces in the Shruti and Drishti, the speech and the hearing, is that plane of reality itself, that creative, original force and truth of existence is expressed, is recreated in the mantra, by the mantra. The mantra is one with the divine origin of existence and the divine power of existence. So that form of expression and speech is a gift of the rishis, the seers and masters of yoga, and who have the vision of the reality. So by translating the Vedas and the Upanishads and writing various texts and eventually Savitri, Sri Aurobindo has embodied that tradition of mantra. If we are engaged in a Tibetan Buddhist kind of Buddhism and practice, we know that there are many teachings that have been developed over 1,000 years by the Tibetan Buddhists that are transmitted through mantras. They are transmitted through sutras, and then they are transmitted through mantras. And it's a very common knowledge and practice today among tantric practitioners of tantric Buddhism. During the Greek period, it was the same thing. The Neoplatonics had mantras, poems to the goddess about transformation. And they used a form of poetic structure that Sri Aurobindo imitates. And he recognizes it as a uniquely Greek structure of poetic expression, the quantitative meter. And he undoubtedly read many of those poems himself and knew not only the structure but the content of them. And the Vedic rishis used a structure that he was also intimately familiar with in Sanskrit. And he managed to achieve in English, the English language, something beyond the ordinary, even best poetic forms. And so we have the possibility of hearing mantra from Sri Aurobindo and allowing it to have that traditional, necessary, essential power and influence that open doors for us and allow us to experience things that are beyond our normal range. And by experiencing them, we get the idea. We have a sense of realities that are beyond the normal range, that are transmitted to us. Similarly, the guru, the true master, is able to transmit these things directly in silence, in total silence, directly to the inner being of an individual from that divine origin that the guru represents and embodies. And so with the mother, in the ashram, in the Sri Aurobindo ashram, for years, the mother was transmitting this peace and power and light just by her presence and her touch. And it was an undeniable other experience, a different one from our normal experience, that has a lasting influence on one's life. So we are enabled to be touched by something other, by these forms of the body of the Guru, the manifestation of the Guru, the mantra, and by a certain inner practice whereby we use our will to silence our mind and open to higher planes of ourself, which also is effective, and it produces in us a pranic vibration, an energy of creativity and liberation, which it happens in us by our will, but it's Agni, it's the God that we enable to act in us forcefully through practice. And there are many practices that can help to do that. So in our meetings so far, I have read some Vedic mantras, and I have read some Savitri mantras. And today I was thinking of reading some passages from Savitri that are to some extent parallel with or express the essences of some of the other practices. For example, the practice of Vajrasana is expressed in the yoga of Savitri, the essence of that practice. The Shavasana, the death pose, which allows the soul to ascend from the body without any resistance from the body. This death experience that is symbolized by that asana is communicated in Savitri by an experience. And we should realize that in a certain sense, yogic discipline and yogic realization, in the end, facilitate the process of death and rebirth. We are learning through practice to die to certain levels of ourselves, to give birth to other levels of ourselves, and eventually to be in a state in which death is actually nothing. And the consciousness is already liberated from its sheaths before death through practice. And then death is simply an expansion of consciousness into its other planes of reality. And so one of the fundamental goals of all tantric practice is that conscious death. And the tantric practitioner understands from the beginning, or at some early point, through the transmission of the Guru, that many of these practices are, in fact, preparations for that higher realization, which happens prior to death, but which becomes then, after death, the process of rebirth. So there are cantos in Savitri that convey that idea to some extent. So I was thinking of reading some of those passages and enabling us to connect their meaning with some of the other practices that we have been summarizing and reviewing here. Pranayama, for example, the holding in and expansion of the prana shakti in the body to liberate the self through the crown chakra and enable the descent of force through the crown chakra. These are also preparations for that final event of life. So I will read some of those cantos, some of those mantras after lunch in the afternoon when we've had a chance to breathe a little bit and be silent if possible. And then experience that the vibrational power and potential of mantra. And then we will consider for a little bit at the end how all of these practices can become a part of integral yoga and enhance the other activities of life. Enhance the other activities of life. Transform the other activities of life. So if you want to put on your microphone and say something at this point, feel free to do so.
What cantos are you reading later?
I'm not going to read a canto. I'm going to read some sections of cantos. One from the Finding of the Soul in the Book of Yoga, a passage from Book 2, I think it's Canto 5 or 6, the passage through death.
Sounds good.
I'm not absolutely sure, but at least from those two cantos. Any other comment?
Yes, I'd been hoping you would read Savitri in this session too. You made too much commentary.
I was hoping also, but we didn't get there.
Yeah, you need to be like a school teacher and time your workshops so that you have time to read Savitri.
I do have time. It'll just be.
No, this session didn't have any. It's like we missed dessert.
Yeah. This lady is my wife, in case you didn't know. she loves to tell me what to do. So, you know, we have to accept that.
What time does the next session start?
3 o'clock here in California.
Okay.
12 o'clock in Europe. I noticed that you were already drinking coffee, Lucille, or tea or something.
Okay, you saw it. Yeah.
You know, the two of you there together on the screen, you and Marga, you are in Europe. Marga is in Spain.
Oh, Marcus, Spain. Okay.
And
Okay.
I met both of these people in England, I mean, in Europe when I went last time. We did a workshop in Belgium and we did a workshop in Spain, Menorca. And Lucille has been also to our workshop in Crestone.
And also in Urville, eh?
And in Oroville. And
Yes.
Julie has been to Crestone.
Mm-hmm.
And Stacy and Kim in the bottom of the screen have been to Oroville and to a workshop here in Allen's Center. Charles has been. Where have you been, Charles? He's been to all of them.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's been to workshops in all of those places. So this gathering is one that I would have anticipated at some point being a physical gathering, and it would have been quite a delightful experience. But in any case, here we are. See you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.